Hello families, welcome to Tales by Felix, where every story opens the door to a new world. Don't forget to subscribe, it would really mean the world to us. Now, let's begin. They called it the marriage of the century. When Isabella walked down the aisle 7 years ago, draped in a gown worth more than most people's houses, the world's cameras followed. She was marrying Victor Harrington, billionaire investor, hotel magnate, and one of the most powerful men in the city. Their photographs dominated magazine covers, the golden couple, the dream life. And on the surface, it was true. Their mansion, sprawling over 10 acres with marble floors and chandeliers imported from Italy, seemed to belong in another world. A fleet of luxury cars lined the driveway. Private jets waited on standby. Dinner parties filled with celebrities and politicians kept their names in headlines. But behind closed doors, Isabella's smile often faltered. One evening, she sat at the long dining table, an absurdly long rectangle of polished oak, her voice barely echoing in the cavernous room. She sipped her wine and glanced at the empty seat across from her. "Victor," she called, her voice carrying hope. A maid approached, lowering her eyes. "Mr. Harrington said he'll be having dinner in his study, ma'am. He has a late-night call with Tokyo." Isabella nodded, her throat tightening. "Of course. Thank you." She ate in silence, the clink of silverware against china sounding almost cruel in its loneliness. Her friends envied her life. "You're so lucky. You have everything." But what they didn't see were the nights she fell asleep alone, the mornings she woke up to cold sheets, and the way her husband looked at her as if she were just another possession to manage. Her perfect life was nothing but a well-polished cage. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between Isabella and Victor widened like a canyon. He had become a ghost in his own home, his life consumed by mergers, deals, and a hunger for more. One night, Isabella entered his study unannounced. The warm glow of the fireplace painted Victor's face in sharp shadows as he tapped furiously at his laptop. "Victor," she began softly. He didn't look up. "Yes. I miss you," she whispered, taking hesitant steps toward him. "We never talk anymore. We never even sit down for dinner like we used to." He exhaled, eyes still on his screen. "Isa, you know what's at stake right now. I can't afford distractions. This deal could change everything." Her jaw tightened. "Everything? Victor, what is everything? You already have more than you'll ever need." Finally, he looked at her, his expression cold, detached. "That's exactly why I can't stop now. People like us don't just live, we conquer. And you knew what you were marrying into." Her chest ached at the words. People like us. She wondered if he even remembered the promises he'd once whispered under moonlight when he was still a man and not just a machine. That night, as she lay awake in their vast bedroom, she realized something terrifying. She wasn't married to a man anymore, she was married to an empire. And she was its prisoner. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. The sound of tires crunching on gravel announced the arrival of a sleek black SUV. Isabella, standing on the balcony, looked down to see a young man step out. He wasn't dressed like the usual uniformed staff. His crisp white shirt was neatly tucked, sleeves rolled to his forearms, revealing sun-kissed skin and a body used to hard work. "Mrs. Harrington," the head butler introduced him later in the foyer, "this is Daniel Cole. Mr. Harrington has hired him as your personal driver." Daniel bowed slightly, his eyes meeting hers just for a second. They were startlingly warm, unlike the calculating stares she was accustomed to from the wealthy men who orbited her life. "Pleasure to meet you, ma'am," he said, voice deep but gentle. She studied him, mid-30s, confident posture, a presence that filled the room without arrogance. He looked like a man who had lived, struggled, survived. "The pleasure's mine," Isabella replied, her tone carefully composed though something stirred inside her. Over the next few days, Daniel's presence became routine. He opened doors, carried shopping bags, and drove her to charity events. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, but when he did, there was sincerity in his words. He didn't fawn over her wealth. He didn't try to impress. He was simply real. One morning, as he drove her through the city, Isabella caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. Their eyes met briefly, and for the first time in years, her heart skipped. She quickly looked away, but something had shifted. The walls of her prison had cracked, just slightly. Isabella began to notice things she shouldn't. The way Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel, strong, steady, reliable. The faint scar across his knuckles, hinting at a past he never mentioned. The quiet patience in his eyes when traffic snarled and horns blared. One evening, after a charity gala, Victor had embarrassed her. He'd dismissed her ideas in front of their guests, reducing her to nothing more than arm candy. On the drive home, silence filled the car. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Daniel glanced at her through the mirror. "Are you all right, ma'am?" His voice broke through her defenses. "Of course," she said too quickly. "Why wouldn't I be?" He didn't press. Instead, he said softly, "Sometimes it's better to admit when something hurts." Her chest tightened. And what if admitting it changes nothing? His eyes lingered on hers through the mirror, steady and knowing. "Then at least you won't be carrying it alone." The words, simple as they were, struck deeper than she expected. No one had spoken to her like that in years, not even Victor. She turned her face to the window, but for the rest of the ride, her thoughts weren't on her husband's insults. They were on the man driving her home. Victor Harrington's birthday party was the event of the season. The mansion glowed with chandeliers, laughter, and champagne. Guests in glittering gowns and tailored suits mingled under the grand ceiling, cameras flashing as politicians toasted the billionaire's success. Isabella played her role perfectly, smiling, gracious, the perfect hostess. But inside, she felt hollow. Midway through the evening, she approached Victor, hoping for a private word. "Victor, can we talk? Just for a minute?" He barely glanced at her. "Later. ISA. Don't make a scene." Her cheeks flushed. But later never came. Instead, during his speech, he made a cutting joke at her expense. "My wife insists on giving me advice about business, but between you and me, she still can't balance a checkbook." The room erupted in laughter. Isabella froze, humiliated. When the party finally ended, she slipped outside, heels clicking against the marble as she sought air. Daniel was waiting by the car. "Rough night?" he asked quietly, opening the door for her. Her composure cracked. "Why does he do it?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Why does he make me feel so small?" For the first time, Daniel didn't hide behind formality. He looked at her, really looked. "Because some men only know how to build empires," he said, "not homes." Tears filled her eyes, and she turned away, stepping into the car. But as they drove off, she caught his reflection in the mirror again. And she realized something terrifying. The person who saw her most clearly wasn't her husband. It was her driver. The rain started without warning, heavy sheets of water drumming against the windshield as Daniel steered the car down the dark country road. Isabella had insisted on attending a charity function despite the storm warnings. Now, with lightning tearing across the sky, the SUV sputtered, coughed, and then stalled. Daniel muttered under his breath, guiding the vehicle to the roadside. "I'll check it." Isabella hugged her shawl tighter. "In this weather?" He offered a small smile. "Engines don't wait for sunshine, ma'am." Minutes later, they stood together under the awning of a deserted gas station while Daniel called for assistance. The rain poured relentlessly, soaking his shirt until it clung to his chest and arms. Isabella tried not to notice. "This is ridiculous," she said with a shaky laugh. "Victor would never stand in the rain like this. He'd have 5 people shielding him with umbrellas." Daniel chuckled, water dripping from his hair. "Well, I'm not Victor." Something about the simplicity of his words made her heart twist. For the first time in years, she felt like she was standing with someone human. Not a tycoon. Not a figurehead. Just a man. As thunder cracked above them, Isabella laughed unexpectedly. Daniel glanced at her. "What's funny?" "Nothing," she said, wiping rain from her cheeks. "It's just, I can't remember the last time I laughed at all." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the storm around them faded. After that night, Isabella found herself replaying their conversations in her head. His words, his glances, the way he had looked at her like she mattered, it was dangerous. One morning, as he drove her to a museum fundraiser, the silence in the car felt heavier than usual. She leaned forward slightly. "Daniel, do you ever regret taking this job?" He raised an eyebrow in the mirror. "Why would I regret it?" "Because," she hesitated, "you're always caught in the middle. Between me and him." Daniel's grip on the wheel tightened. "My job is to make sure you're safe. That's all that matters to me." The sincerity in his tone made her pulse quicken. She lowered her voice. "Sometimes I wonder if you see me, or just the role I play." For the first time, he glanced directly at her, his gaze lingering. "I see you, Isabella." Her breath caught. She quickly looked out the window, terrified of what her heart was whispering. But she knew one thing: it was no longer just loneliness. It was attraction. And it was growing stronger every day. Victor wasn't blind. He had noticed the change in Isabella. She smiled more, dressed with a different spark, carried herself like a woman reborn. One evening, as they prepared for yet another gala, he snapped while adjusting his cufflinks. "You've been distracted lately." "Distracted?" Isabella asked, keeping her voice calm. "Yes," Victor said sharply. "Always out, always glowing for no reason. Is there something you want to tell me?" Her heart thudded. "Does he know?" She shook her head. "Perhaps I've simply decided to find joy in things again." Victor studied her with narrowed eyes. "Joy is expensive, I say. And nothing in this world is free." That night, he made a call in his private study. "I want her followed. Discreetly. And keep an eye on the driver." The walls of Isabella's secret were closing in before she even realized it. It happened unexpectedly. They were stuck in heavy traffic, the city lights flickering through the windows. Isabella reached into her bag for her phone, but it slipped, tumbling onto the floor near Daniel's seat. "Sorry," she murmured, leaning forward. At the same time, he reached down to pick it up. Their hands brushed. It wasn't much, just a touch. But it sent a shockwave through her entire body. She froze, and so did he. For a moment, neither of them moved, their hands lingering against each other longer than they should have. Slowly, Daniel placed the phone in her palm. His voice was rougher than usual when he said, "Here." Their eyes met in the mirror. No words were spoken, but the silence screamed louder than any confession. When she finally looked away, her heart was pounding so hard she thought he could hear it. The night of confession arrived wrapped in vulnerability. Isabella had just endured another cruel dinner with Victor, where he dismissed her opinions in front of influential guests. Later, unable to contain her emotions, she asked Daniel to drive aimlessly through the city instead of straight home. They parked near the quiet waterfront, the skyline glittering in the distance. Isabella stared at the waves, her voice trembling. "Do you know what it's like," she whispered, "to live in a house filled with everything you could ever want, and still feel like you're starving?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Yes, I do." She turned to him, shocked. "You?" He nodded slowly. "I wasn't always a driver. I had dreams once. But life has a way of stripping you down. You keep smiling while you're breaking inside." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "That's exactly how I feel. Every single day." Without thinking, she reached for his hand. He didn't pull away this time. "Isabella." His voice was low, conflicted. "This is dangerous." "I know," she whispered. "But tell me you don't feel it too." He closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, the battle was over. "I do." Their lips met, hesitant at first, then with the hunger of two people who had been starving for far too long. In that instant, there was no billionaire, no mansion, no chains of status. There was only a woman and a man, finding in each other what the world had denied them. The kiss had changed everything. What began as stolen glances soon turned into stolen hours. Isabella and Daniel became shadows in their own lives, meeting in discreet cafes at the edge of town, slipping into hotels under false names, lingering in the SUV long after their supposed destinations. For Isabella, it was like breathing again. Daniel didn't just touch her body, he touched her soul. He listened when she spoke, laughed when she teased, and held her when she cried. One afternoon, as they sat in the car outside a bookstore, Isabella reached over, her fingers tracing the veins on his hand. "Do you ever think about what people would say if they knew?" Daniel's jaw tightened. They'd say you were insane to trade silk sheets for a man who can barely afford rent. And what would you say? She asked, eyes searching his. He turned, cupping her face gently. I'd say you chose love. And that makes you the sanest woman alive. Her heart swelled. But behind her joy was fear. Fear of discovery, fear of what Victor might do if he ever found out. What Isabella didn't know was that her fear was no longer hypothetical. The clock on their secret was already ticking. Victor Harrington had built his empire on one rule: never be blindsided. That's why when his private investigator dropped a folder on his desk one Tuesday morning, Victor didn't flinch outwardly. Inside were photographs, grainy but damning. Isabella entering a hotel with Daniel. Isabella laughing in a cafe, hand brushing Daniel's arm. Isabella's lips against Daniel's in the dark shadow of a car. Victor's fingers curled into fists. His face turned red, but his voice, when he spoke, was ice. "Destroy him," he ordered. The investigator hesitated. "Sir, he's just a driver. A clean record, works 2 jobs, supports his mother. Taking him down." "I said destroy him," Victor roared, slamming the desk. "I want him blacklisted from every job, his bank accounts frozen, his family ruined. He will beg me for mercy, and I will not give it." The investigator nodded reluctantly and left. Victor leaned back in his chair, chest heaving. "So, Isa," he whispered to himself, "you want to humiliate me? Let's see how you enjoy watching your little toy burn." That evening, Victor confronted Isabella. He waited until the guests left, until the mansion's lights were dim, until only the 2 of them stood in the cavernous living room. He tossed the folder onto the glass coffee table. Isabella froze as the photographs spilled out. Her heart dropped into her stomach. "Explain," Victor demanded, his voice low but venomous. She looked at the photos, then at him. For years she had lived in fear of disappointing him, of losing everything. But something in her snapped. She lifted her chin. "There's nothing to explain. I love him." Victor's face darkened with disbelief. "You love him?" He laughed cruelly. "Isa, he's a driver. A nobody. You'd throw away your life, your name, your empire, for a man who opens doors for a living." "Yes," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Because he opens more than doors. He opens my heart." Victor lunged forward, his hand gripping her arm. "Do you have any idea what I can do to him? To you? I can end him, Isa. End him with a single phone call." Her eyes burned with tears, but she didn't flinch. "Then you'll prove everything I already know, that you're incapable of love. And I'd rather live poor with a man who loves me than rich with a man who doesn't." For the first time in their marriage, she saw fear flash in his eyes. Not fear of losing her, but fear of losing control. "I'm filing for divorce," she whispered. Victor's face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this." Maybe she would. But in that moment, Isabella felt freer than she had in years. The divorce papers hit the press like a bomb. Headlines screamed across newspapers and TV screens. "Billionaire's wife runs away with driver." From mansion to motel, the fall of Isabella Harrington. Cameras camped outside her apartment, reporters shoved microphones in her face, and socialites who once begged for her attention now mocked her downfall. One reporter shouted as she walked quickly to Daniel's car, "Isabella, do you really believe your driver can give you the life you're used to?" She paused, turned, and said clearly, "I don't need the life I'm used to. I need the life I deserve." The clip went viral overnight. Some admired her courage, others ridiculed her. But either way, Isabella was no longer invisible. Inside their modest apartment, she and Daniel sat on the floor eating takeout from cartons. The sound of laughter and chatter echoed from the street below. Daniel looked at her apologetically. "I'm sorry you lost everything because of me." She shook her head, leaning into him. "I didn't lose everything. I lost things that never mattered. And I gained you." They clinked their chopsticks together like glasses, sealing their pact in the simplest, most genuine moment of her life. Gone were the chandeliers and marble floors. In their place, creaky wooden floors, a leaky faucet, and a bedroom with barely enough space for a queen-sized bed. But Isabella found beauty in it. One evening, she stood at the window, watching children play in the alley below. Daniel came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Do you miss it?" he asked softly. "The mansion," she replied. "Sometimes. But then I remember how lonely it felt." Daniel pressed a kiss to her temple. "I can't promise you riches, I say. Only myself." She smiled through tears. "That's all I ever wanted." They lay on their small bed that night, hands intertwined. Outside, the city roared with life, uncaring of their choices. But inside their tiny apartment, Isabella felt something she had never felt in all her years of wealth: peace. She closed her eyes and whispered, "For the first time, I feel at home." The first months in their new apartment were both beautiful and brutal. Daniel worked double shifts, driving during the day and helping at a mechanic shop at night, while Isabella tried to adjust to her new life. Gone were the designer gowns. Now she wore second-hand jeans and simple blouses. Gone were the gala dinners. Now she cooked spaghetti in a tiny kitchen with a flickering light. Yet she laughed more than she ever had. One evening, Daniel returned home, his shirt stained with grease. He looked exhausted, but when he saw her sitting on the couch surrounded by thrift store decor she'd proudly arranged, he smiled. "You've made this place ours," he said, sinking down beside her. She kissed his cheek. "I never realized happiness could look like this." But happiness wasn't the whole story. The tabloids wouldn't leave her alone. Whispers followed her in grocery stores. She traded billions for a driver. Some nights, she wept quietly, afraid Daniel would hear. And yet, every time she faltered, his arms reminded her, they still had each other. Victor Harrington had not forgiven. At a board meeting, while his executives discussed quarterly profits, his mind was elsewhere. He slammed his pen down. "I don't care what it costs. Find a way to ruin them. Make sure she never crawls back to society again." Soon, Daniel began receiving threatening calls. His mechanic job mysteriously vanished after budget cuts. His driver's license was temporarily suspended due to clerical errors. Isabella's bank accounts were frozen pending investigations. One night, Daniel came home, slamming the door harder than usual. "They're coming after me, I say," he said, voice sharp with frustration. "I can't keep a job. Every door I knock on is already closed." Her chest tightened. "Victor." "Yes." "Victor." He paced the small room. "He won't stop until he's crushed us." Isabella stood, taking his hands. "Then let him come. He can take money, jobs, reputations, but he can't take what we have." But even as she spoke, fear gnawed at her. How long could love survive against a man with endless power? The pressure began to crack their foundation. Bills piled up. Daniel's pride bruised under the weight of being unable to provide. Isabella, though she never said it aloud, struggled with the sudden shift from luxury to scarcity. One night, an argument erupted. "Maybe he was right," Daniel snapped, voice rough with exhaustion. "Maybe you were insane to throw away that life for me." Isabella recoiled, tears springing to her eyes. "You think I care about mansions? About wealth? I walked away because none of it mattered without love. Then why do you look at me like I've failed you?" She shook her head fiercely. "I don't. I look at you like you're the only man who ever saw me. Don't you understand that?" The room went silent, both of them breathing heavily. Finally, Daniel collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I don't want to lose you too." Isabella knelt in front of him, taking his hands away from his face. "You won't. We've lost everything else, Daniel. But we still have us. And that's more than Victor will ever have. It was messy, painful, but it was real. And it was love." Months later, Daniel found an opportunity he hadn't expected. An old friend from his past, Marcus, a small-time entrepreneur, offered him a chance to co-own a delivery business. It was risky, with little capital, but Daniel grabbed it with both hands. He worked tirelessly, building routes, training drivers, and personally making deliveries at dawn. Isabella supported him, even designing flyers and talking to neighbors about their services. Slowly, the business grew. From 2 vans, they expanded to 10. From local deliveries, they began servicing small businesses across the city. One evening, Isabella walked into their apartment to find Daniel grinning, holding a contract. "What is it?" she asked. He handed it to her. "A deal with a major retail chain. I say, we're not just surviving anymore. We're building something." Tears filled her eyes. She threw her arms around him. "Daniel, you did it. We did it." For the first time since leaving Victor's mansion, Isabella felt a different kind of wealth, a wealth built not on empires or greed, but on grit and love. Years later, the city buzzed about a charity gala hosted at the very hotel Victor Harrington had once mocked her at. Isabella and Daniel arrived hand in hand, both dressed elegantly though not extravagantly. Their delivery company had grown into a respected logistics firm, earning them quiet but undeniable success. The moment they stepped into the ballroom, whispers spread like wildfire. "That's her. The billionaire's ex-wife. Did you hear? Their company is thriving." Victor, standing at the center of the room, froze when he saw them. His empire was still vast, but his personal life had crumbled. Divorces, scandals, and loneliness had aged him. Isabella approached him, her head held high. "Victor," she greeted coolly. He smirked bitterly. "So, the driver made you a queen after all?" She smiled faintly, glancing at Daniel. "No. He made me a woman who no longer needs a king." Victor's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. The room seemed to shift, eyes turning toward her not with ridicule, but admiration. As she and Daniel walked away, whispers followed. She gave up everything for love, and still won. Outside, the cool night air wrapped around them. Daniel squeezed her hand. "Do you ever regret it?" She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering. "Not for a single second." And with that, the woman who had once been a prisoner in a mansion walked freely into a future she had chosen for herself. Rich, not in money, but in love. The end.